Welcome to McKinley. I don't have a drink problem, but I definitely have a loco problem. This is my wine rack for locomotives. It's called Doncaster, and here's why it exists. The era goals for McKinley Railway is a 20-year time span, going from the mid-1950s through to the mid-1970s. During that time, as we operate the railway, every piece of rolling stock, bar a few sets of the wagons, will have to change. And there are a number of reasons for that. Take, for example, coaches. Mark I coaches, their liveries changed from blood and custard to maroon. Some of them went on to be chocolate and cream, others then went on to blue-grey, and then they got withdrawn and replaced by Mark II stock. Then we have other kinds of stock such as freight trains, Freightliner trains. They came in the mid-60s, but even they changed quite consistently through the time frames of the eras we're running on McKinley. When it comes to locomotives, if you just take the diesels, they started off in plain green, and then they had various levels of yellow ends. And then in the mid-60s, they started to introduce the blue with full yellow ends. That then became predominant into the early 70s, and then BR introduced tops. So there are a number of changes with locomotives as well. Our giant subterranean storage area, that we've called Hades, has the capacity to store 160 trains along about 60 to 64 lines of track. All of those trains will have a locomotive attached to them, but the locomotives change more frequently than the stock sets that exist at the relevant time. And going back to locomotives for a second, we start the railway totally steam in 1956, diesels come in 1958, the steam have all gone by the end of 1968, and then we're running an entirely diesel fleet from there till 1975. All this means is that we have a need for more locomotives than we have storage tracks down in Hades. And so the concept of Doncaster was formed, a virtual off-layout storage area. And the concept is quite simple. It's like a wine rack, capable of holding 100 locomotives that will be used to support the railway's operations. In Hades, we have, as I said earlier, 62 lines and about 160 or so storage blocks. Each block can hold a train. Those trains are divided into two kinds of train. There are operational trains and there are scenic trains. Operational trains are brought up onto the layout with an appropriate locomotive that's suitable for the start of the era that stock set that they're attached to works with. They're brought onto the layout into the operating areas such as Sheffield, London, Manchester, and the operators will then attach different locomotives to those stock sets as those trains go around the layout according to the timetable movements we have. The scenic trains are different. Scenic trains, it's a term I've invented to some extent, and it's designed for trains that we don't have locations for, such as Freightliner trains, cement trains, colliery trains, so coal wagons loaded and empty. We don't have collieries, we don't have ports, we don't have cement works. But these trains ran around the railways in real life in great quantities. And that was always my mission here on McKinley, to have lots of trains going by in the background that add that touch of realism about the railways as they existed, as I saw them around Bristol and Bath in my youth. In the operation environment, we also have 3 engine sheds on McKinley. There is Sheffield, London, and Manchester. And in each of those sheds, we need a pool of locomotives that the operators can rely on to take their next train out. It could be an express locomotive, it could be a heavy goods locomotive, it could be a trip locomotive, but they need a pool of engines to be able to choose trains to work with, so to speak. it just adds to operational interest. And so Doncaster's got to support that functionality as well, in the sense that we would take trains from Doncaster, put them onto the track, they would go to the location, we take old trains off from the sheds back to this. This is our locomotive storage rack, really. So let's get into the nuts and bolts and show you how it actually works. This is a wooden frame. It's a 10 by 10 matrix, and as I mentioned earlier, we've labelled it along the top from A to J and down the sides 1 to 10. And in each of these here is a Pico loco lift. I believe Pico stopped making these, but they're great for what we need them for. We've adapted them in a number of ways. The things that we've done is we've changed the foam on the outsides. We've made it slightly thicker. We bought this heavier grade foam, and we've also made it slightly deeper so that it protects the locomotives. We've also put a label on the end of each of these boxes, so to speak, or these cassettes. And then what you can't see here, but we'll show in more detail in a moment, if you come and look closely here, is there is, on the back of it, we've put an RFID tag in the cassette and then put some foam in front of it to protect the buffers against this stop. Here's an example of H8, and you can see at the back, there's the RFID tag. And then we cover that with a piece of foam to protect it and also the locomotive. The logic of why we've done that is relevant if you come and have a look down here. So in the Sheffield depot, effectively we have two Doncaster platforms. There's this strange little mounted thing here, which behind it are two RFID antennas. They're designed to marry up with the antennas that are embedded behind the cassette name. So this is G7, and when I put this empty cassette down on Doncaster 2 platform here, the system will register that this cassette is in platform 2 Doncaster. It knows it's empty. We have another RFID reader here, and this is designed to catch the locomotive details. And if I was to manually slide this thing forward a second, and as you drive it in, the point is that this would have been on the layout. And if it's gone over this reader, the system can safely assume that it must be coming in to go into this cassette. And therefore, at this point now, that locomotive is in cassette G7 in Doncaster. If it was in this cassette and I then drove it back out onto the railway here, then it would go over the same reader and it would say, the system knows it was in the cassette system, it's now gone over here, it must now be in Sheffield. And that's how we track locomotives in here. The operator hasn't got to know that 35028 is stored in J1. The system knows, the system will help you. So that's how it physically works and how the operators are going to basically be taking engines in and out of Doncaster. The other bit now is the database. For every engine on the railway, it's in the database. We know, well, we've defined a start month and year and an end month of year for these locomotives to come on and off the railway. And so it's quite a simple thing for a database to help you to say, can you bring out F1 and H2? Can you also bring out I5 and also get rid of that steamer and that plain green class 33? It will know because the stock has expired logically, i.e. its time is up. It needs to go to Doncaster to be retired, and then it has to wait. You might be wondering now, and this is a good point to introduce, the idea of railway time. So railway time has two different functions. We run normal time in operations on the railway, i.e. 1 minute of railway time is 1 minute of real time. And the reason is that our railway here is predominantly based on operations, shunting, moving locomotives. If it takes 5 minutes to shunt a set of wagons, you can't accelerate that. What we do have is the ability to slow it down for novice operators so that we can actually go to quarter time rather than try, we never envisaged going to double time, i.e. twice as fast. It wouldn't work. The other clock in the railway time is the month and the year. And the way we've defined it at present is that every 30 minutes of operating time on the railway, the clock moves forward a month in the year. So in 6 hours of operation, we move forward 1 year in railway time. The hour time still moves forward by the minute, and we intend to start operations at 5 a.m. and finish at midnight. So we'll have an 18 or 19-hour operating day and go through the whole gamut of time, all the way from pre-rush hour into night freights, and then pause it at night and then start again at 5. And we'll run it round the clock, but all the time the year clock, the month and year, will be moving forward incrementally in time. And that's how the software will know when it's time to expire, to take this off and to put a repaint and put a yellow end on it. So the clever clogs amongst you will have worked out that if we're moving a month every 30 minutes of operating time, that's quite some amount of operating to get through 20 years. Our goal is to try and have the whole time frame, i.e. from the start in 1956 to the end in 1975, to happen in 1 calendar year. The downside of that is if you're only interested in steam, you only have to come here between January and August. And if you want blue diesels, you've got to come here between July and December. And if you're interested in Top's locomotive, it's November. And if you're Darren and you only want the Dominoes, I'm sorry, we stopped in December. That's the bizarre thing about this. It's going to take a long time to run through all the changes, to bring all the stock up and take it back down. So the even smarter ones amongst you will work out that there's a lot of work to do around about the end of the year. So I'd like any of you that are free around about January the 1st to make a resolution to come down and help shift all the stock that's on the railway into Hades and all the stuff that's in Hades onto the railway so we can start back in 1956 again. So that's the guts of Doncaster Works. And if any of you have any of these Pico localifts, I'm desperate. I need another 40. So I'll be putting the email on this particular video. If you have any spare and would be prepared to donate them to McKinley, I'll be very grateful. Thanks very much for watching. Take care.